if Salesforce is very confident that the CRM platform is effectively a database, CRM platforms, ERP platforms, CRM platforms, if this acts closer to a database than an application, then all these things that startup founders say about you want, say, the CRM to be a system of intelligence and not a database might be completely and utterly fucking wrong. Welcome to Agentic Data, a podcast about data and AI. I'm your host, Joseph Moon, CEO of Oxygen Intelligence. And today, I want to talk about the Salesforce acquisition of Informatica. You see here, Salesforce completes acquisition of Informatica November 18th, 2025. I think a lot of folks have been predicting such an acquisition to happen for months and for years now. I think this truly completes the final leg of the data consolidation arc of the past 5 to 10 years. DBT merged with Tran to basically become the modern equivalent of Informatica. Google acquired Looker a few years back. Salesforce acquired Tableau quickly following thereafter. And finally, with the acquisition of Informatica by Salesforce, Salesforce really has the complete package in terms of data ingestion, data governance, general data management, as well as the data insights layer. So that includes Tableau and collaborative analytics, business intelligence workflows, some amount of data transformations, some amount of semantic modeling. So really, Salesforce has the complete stack in its arsenal, so to speak. And I think this shows, again, the prowess of Salesforce's M&A abilities and its foresight to combine different companies together to get to market dominance. I think Salesforce was at one point heavily criticized for perhaps overpaying for Slack and have been criticized in general by its lack of product innovation and instead its focus on M&A as the way to grow in an inorganic way. But it is very clear that Salesforce has made itself a very great acquirer of technology companies and perhaps not the best integrator of these companies based on my conversations with former executives and CEOs of companies that Salesforce bought. But no matter, I think once the company achieves some sort of maturity, I think the base asset of the software platform and the base group of important personnel that may or may not be the top executives can combine into the bigger acquiring company and figure things out and accelerate things forward. I think in the previous few episodes, we talked about the strategic position of Slack in the AI wars. Slack has positioned itself very clearly as the winner in corporate and enterprise communication. And it is not just a chat platform. It has really become the central place where all communication gets done, including communication with AI agents and communication with external platforms and external applications. And this is quite important because the next generation communication software is going to be really focused on communication between folks inside companies, between humans and AI agents inside companies, and between humans and agents across companies as well. So one could think of talking to a group of humans and AI agents inside of my company, but also having a shared channel in which both of my humans and my AI agents are talking to another company's group of humans and AI agents and really doing work in that manner. And Slack is really well positioned to take advantage of this. And one reason for that is that Slack was able to build itself in a programmatic way. So I believe that they're one of the first few companies to really enforce this WebRTC standard and propel itself forward in that manner, which allowed it to very quickly become the single source of truth across web, mobile, desktop, etc., and become a much better chat product than anybody has ever created before. And so it is extremely well positioned for the new world. And for those folks who are saying that chat is not the durable interface in which humans are going to be interacting with agents. Perhaps this is being contrarian for the sake of being a contrarian. Most likely, chat is the natural interface in which folks communicate to one another and do work with one another. In some sense, I shouldn't even be able to tell whether I'm talking to a human or I'm talking to an AI agent if the AI agent is sufficiently human like, has human names, so on and so forth. So the future of really asking questions and producing artifacts and editing artifacts, all these things will most likely be done in Slack. And just the interconnect between Slack and Salesforce's native CRM solution is going to be a quite strong point of integration. And the fact that Salesforce now has access to the end to end suite of data products, starting from data integration all the way to data insights, makes Salesforce a really interesting company to be able to really eat into the most important enterprise workflows: CRM, ERP, HRM, data. These things are canonically the most important enterprise workflows. And if Salesforce plays the cards right, and I think it is playing the cards right in some sense of acquiring young AI native entrepreneurs and leaders into the company, then perhaps Salesforce will be able to expand from a position of the system of record into the system of intelligence. I think there are two ways to think about this. A system of intelligence company is generally positioned as the layer above the system of record that takes action, understands data, orchestrates actions, and so forth. This could work well with the system of record companies, or the system of intelligence companies have to build its own system of record features and a subproduct within its product. And that is not easy to do. And generally speaking, it will be very hard to displace something as entrenched as Salesforce. So if we just think about the CRM category, AI native CRM companies, one could think that that could displace the entire category, or one could think that the system of record lock-in effect is quite strong. It's almost like a database. It's an application, but it's effectively operating like a database. So it's really hard to rip out. And so perhaps the system of intelligence companies will have to work well with HubSpot and Salesforce, et cetera. And therefore, it makes a lot of sense for Salesforce to acquire an intelligence plane, the intelligence layer to the CRM, and then integrate it within the service. So if Salesforce is very confident that the CRM platform is effectively a database, CRM platforms, ERP platforms, CRM platforms, if this acts closer to a database than an application, then all these things that startup founders say about you want, say, the CRM to be a system of intelligence and not a database might be completely and utterly fucking wrong. And this might be incredibly naive to say and think. But of course, founders have no alternative. Even if they don't really believe in this, they have to say this because this is the rhetoric that gets them funded, and this is the rhetoric that really pushes things forward. But if we think about this chessboard of founders tackling the system of intelligence, the incumbents really holding on to the system of record, it will be interesting to see how companies get consolidated and how companies get disrupted. And I think the CRM category will be one of the first categories to be either disrupted or consolidated in the case of, say, the incumbent swallowing the intelligence layer versus disruption being a really disruptive player coming in to take both the system of record and the system of intelligence. So this is going to be an epic battle, and it's going to be very entertaining and very educational for us to observe. Now, moving on to a research topic. We have been thinking about this concept called the enterprise context layer. I think we have discussed the concept of context and context engineering as a first class citizen. And the shift from prompt engineering to context engineering as the valid and the more mature form of engineering for agents in terms of getting data and really getting the agent to make use of that data to perform actions and analyze information and so forth. And this article is an interesting summary of that arc of thought. And this article was written by Andy Treatman from Theory. And this article is called Why the Business Context Layer is the Key to Making AI Work in Enterprise. Let me read an excerpt. So how can we make AI automations work? We need some way to, one, understand how an enterprise works, two, deliver that knowledge to an AI system, and three, maintain and update the knowledge over time. We believe this will create the first major new system of record in years of business context layer. What is a business context layer? Today, a new customer support rep might be told to read a 100-page standard operating procedure during onboarding. The SOP includes instructions on how to run processes and handle exceptions. If a customer wants to change account information, always ask for verification. If they ask for a refund, consult these policy rules. In most companies, these documents are incomplete, outdated, and even contradictory. This leads to teams building tribal knowledge on their own and following processes inconsistently. When there are millions of AI agents performing complex tasks across the enterprise, we will need something much better, a living system of record that documents all the written and unwritten rules for how a company operates and delivers the right instructions to AI systems as they do work. We call this a business context layer, or BCL. That is interesting. A pretty interesting high-level overview of the necessity of such a thing to exist. And we at Oxygen Intelligence and I certainly agree with the premise of something like this having to exist. And if we double click here into this diagram that Andy has built, it looks like he's proposing for a context database that integrates with operational data, workflow tools, humans, and AI agents to really power all sorts of agentic workflows. And here, he has a final paragraph, which I found to be quite interesting. Context versus RL environments, RL standing for reinforcement learning. In parallel to this emerging context layer, many startups are building digital twins of enterprise software and systems. Digital twin being something that Palantir really introduced and popularized as a way to think about how to model out the entire organization as entities and then doing things like analyzing information based on these entities and also taking actions based on these entities. Building digital twins of enterprise software and systems. You could let millions of AI agents loose in these simulated environments, provide a goal, e.g., resolve these support inquiries, and they will learn how to make business decisions and operate tools via reinforcement learning. We think this technique is powerful, but it solves a different problem than PCL, and I would agree. But I would also agree that why not do both? You could probably do both to really get an agentic system to work well. But I think implicit in what he's saying, and what I also think, is that in a lot of cases, formalizing the business context, say this like abstract version of SOPs, is likely much easier than having the agent learn through reinforcement learning. If you actually conduct reinforcement learning, one learns that reinforcement learning is extremely hard to do. This is extremely data intensive, takes a long time, and converges very slowly. So you just need a lot of training examples and a lot of time and a lot of compute to get this done. And the idea is, let's say humans have created the rules for mathematics. You could program a reinforcement learning environment where you could try to train a neural network from examples to come up with an entire theory of mathematics. Or you could come up with, let's say, base concepts in mathematics and have those primitives as axioms, let's say, and then propagate things forward using algebra and logic. So pretty much, I think implicitly what we're getting to here is BCL is algebra and logic, and RL is probability theory. So if you have, and logic is very airtight, and logic is the basis on which humans make arguments and persuade each other to some degree. Of course, there's some emotions involved in persuasion, but the basis of law and medicine and government and just discourse is purportedly based on logic, and a lot of times it is. And it's extremely effective. It's like the unreasonable effective of logic. In the same way, science, physics, engineering, these disciplines are all really driven by math, and math is extremely unreasonably effective. And so math and logic really are extremely effective tools to get things done and to think about things and so forth. And so in some sense, logic, so context and logic, these are very compressed objects, very deterministic objects in some sense. And if you could use that, one should do that instead of doing something pretty fucking stupid, which is RL. So I think that is the crux of the argument here, the implicit argument that allows for this to happen. And in terms of the context database, this is a more profound statement because it asserts that this context layer is going to be the new critical piece of enterprise infrastructure, which we very much agree, empowering all sorts of agentic workflows. And I think this will matter a lot when the agentic workflows have to be very correct. And so something like search and coding, these things are less important to be high precision. High recall, you definitely need. Lower precision is acceptable, but with higher precision operating procedures, like interfacing directly with customers and giving them refunds and things like that, financial institutions really trying to automate all sorts of very high precision tasks. When you need high precision, you need high amount of context that allows for high precision. So I think it really depends on the adoption of the context layer will likely highly depend on the agentic workflows having to be very high precision. And things that are high precision can be things like data analytics, finance, compliance, security, customer operations in heavily regulated industries, and so on and so forth. So I think infrastructure has to be necessitated by the application powering it. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense to actually adopt the infrastructure. And so it'll be very interesting to see how this pans out, because just like how a standalone semantic layer without a BI tool did not make any sense, and most of these companies, literally almost all companies, maybe except for two companies, failed in this space. I would posit that if a company is trying to build an enterprise context database without an application on top of it, 90+% of these companies will fail just because it's insanely hard to necessitate a piece of infrastructure without a critical workflow that is powered by the application layer on top of the infrastructure layer. So, profound observation, certain implicit arguments towards the end, but certainly we are reaching a point where the context layer is going to become a standard and consensus idea. And this is related to how I said the ontology is going to be a consensus idea. This is an extremely related concept. Basically, the idea is that you need something to really formalize the concepts as well as the engineering of artifacts that must be injected into the AI agent for it to operate properly. This type of engineering is even more critical in high precision systems that will eventually have higher recall as well. But it will start off with lower recall, high precision systems that will get to high precision and high recall systems and converge to that feature. And so I think we should think more deeply about the context layer, and we should also start thinking about specific ways one could build context layers in production. And there you have it. I wanted to talk about these two things. We'll continue our discussion next time on agentic data.